On today's show, how far can the Mavs make it in the playoffs this year? Is it time to get worried about Jalen Brunson? And is it time to put Spencer Dinwiddie in the starting lineup? We got a lot of questions from you guys. Nick Angstadt and Lauren Gunn will answer it on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Hey, Dallas Mavericks are NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good!
And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you can subscribe to the show. Thank you to everybody that listened after the loss yesterday. I'm always surprised that those that come back after a loss, especially one that bad. Joining me, my co-host today, guest of the show, friend of the pod, contributor at Mavs Moneyball writer. What you got for me, Lauren Gunn?
Honestly, I'm just glad it's a new day. Like you said, I don't think I could handle thinking about yesterday's game. Like, I was excited for it all day, and then
That's sad too.
Yeah, because everybody was like, I'm ready to talk trash to the Knicks fans. I'm ready for it. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm ready for it too. And then it just...
Lauren, it's all they have. That's all they have. I literally was on Locked On NBA with Alex Wolf, host of Locked On Knicks, and was like, that's all you guys got, man. You got RJ, and they got beating the Mavs. That's like the only thing they have right now as far as the Knicks.
Yeah, I'm genuine. I mean, not to go on a whole thing, but I am genuinely worried about the Knicks and their future if they don't get it. If they don't get it together, I hate to say it, but I just...
Especially if they're just keeping Tibbs, right? Well, this is not a Knicks podcast. All right.
Right.
On today's show, we're getting into a mailbag. We got a whole bunch of questions from you guys. Thanks to everybody that responded on Twitter at Locked On Mavs or responded in the community tab, the post on YouTube. And appreciate everybody that submitted their questions. We got a whole bunch of stuff on a playoff run this year. Can the Mavs make some kind of playoff run this year? Can Luka lead them to a title, being the only All-Star? Then we're going to talk all about Spencer Dinwiddie and Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson, his play as of late. Is it time to get worried about him playing against really good teams? Talk about that and share some numbers about him. And then Spencer Dinwiddie, he's played 9 games with the Mavs this year. And is it time to put him into the starting lineup? Because he's just been that good. Let's start here, though, Lauren. Tim asked the question, how far do you think this Mavs team can go in the playoffs? Whew, this is a big question because the goal has just been to win a first round series, right? But what is the ceiling of this team?
Yeah, it's a tough question because as far as, I mean, it all starts with the first round. It's got to be one round at a time. And so to me, a lot of it obviously hinders on what the matchup is. I don't want to be naive and count out other teams in the West. Like if we do get past the first round, say if we do go up against someone like Utah, because personally, I know this may be an unpopular opinion, but like I'm fine with Utah. Utah is like one of the few that I'm okay with.
It is not an unpopular opinion on this show because Isaac Harris has been literally calling for them like Thor calls for Thanos in Endgame. He's like, bring me the Jazz. Like every day he's been saying that.
Yeah, I think Kirk thinks I'm crazy, but I am fine with it.
Lauren, that is a fine place to be in.
You know what? I'm gonna throw that back at him because you're so right. But I think with the Mavs, like Luka is on another level, like he's doing great. So like in terms of ceiling, it's difficult because when you have someone that good, it's really hard to like pinpoint where they can go. But right now, I think it needs to just be one series at a time. And I think that this team right now, even though the front court, there are serious concerns there, they do have enough talent to get them out of the first round.
Yeah, it's a good place to move into this next question from Jonah. What do the Mavs centers need to do defensively for the team to make a run in the playoffs? And you start looking at some of the matchups, and we'll get into them in just a minute, but the Mavs centers are kind of my biggest question, right? I mean, we're going to talk about Dinwiddie and Brunson and obviously Luka, but those 3 guys, like I'm not super worried about them. Like maybe the shooters, you're worried about like a game like what happened against the Knicks the other night, but the Mavs centers are going to be huge in this run, in any series. You start looking around the teams, Memphis, Golden State, Utah, Denver, they all pose different kinds of threats to the Mavs. And the centers have to do drastically different things in all those series and guard different guys. And I think that's the area that's going to be under the biggest microscope. It's Dwight. It's the minutes of Maxey. It's Maxey hitting threes. It's Maxey getting back to the defense that he was at before he was hurt, and even the defense that he was at a couple years ago. That's going to be the big thing. Does Marquise Chris factor into any of this? Does he ever come back from his right knee soreness? The guy has, I mean, how long has Marquise Chris been out? I thought he was going to be at least a little bit of a factor. Will Boban ever see the court again unless the Mavs only play Denver like in the playoff series?
Yeah.
That I think the Mavs centers defensively have to be absolutely massive for them.
Yeah, it's a tough thing right now. And I so badly hope that they get Marquise Chris back, because I do think that he would be a big part of it, but you also need enough time for him to be in shape and ready to go. And right now, when I'm watching Maxey and I'm watching Bertans, when he even gets out there, it almost
I
seems
didn't even mention him.
Yeah, it seems like those two have, and I could just be getting this wrong, but it looks to me like they've kind of thrown each other off. Like Bertans doesn't look totally sure of himself as much as he did like the first 2 games after the trade. Maxey has been shooting pretty poorly for a good bit now. And it just looks like, I don't know how those two are like affecting each other. And I don't even know if they are, it just doesn't look quite right. And so part of me wonders if over these next couple of games, we're going to see Bertans even less. And then maybe Maxey starts to get more of a rhythm back under him. That's my hope. But as far as defensively, like we know what each of these guys bring to the table. And so like, you kind of just got to roll with it. Cause at this point it's unreasonable to expect some massive change defensively.
We've seen Davis Bertans in 9 games. He is right now 13 of 44 from 3. That's 29.5%. And some of these, I mean, he's chucking up at the end of shot clocks. He's just throwing up these shots, and some of them are bad threes, right? But if you take out like, I don't know, even like 10 of those bad threes, that's still not a great percentage for Davis Bertans. And so I also agree with you. I think they're kind of experimenting with him, seeing if they can get his value up a little bit, like eating some of those minutes, especially with Chris out, Boban largely kind of unplayable because of this new system. But yeah, I think we'll see less of Boban. And all of a sudden, this team that had like 7 centers at the start of the season, and then in the middle of the year, they only had like 1 center because all of them were unplayable. Now we're back to, we just have Dwight and Maxey, and that's kind of it, right? It's just back to those 2 guys again. And I agree with you. I do think Davis and Maxey, when they've been paired together, that should be a good pairing, right? On paper, it's like, okay, both those guys can shoot. Maxey can roll a little bit. Davis can, Maxey can cover Davis's deficiencies defensively a little bit. You think those guys will play well together, but they do seem to not be able to know exactly where they're going. And I think Maxey playing with Dwight always knows where to be. Dwight always knows where to go. He just knows how to play with Luka. He knows how to play Jason Kidd's system at this point. And I think that pairing has been a lot better for Maxey. And now with Davis, it's just a little messy, and they still have to try to figure out a little bit more how to play together, where to be, where to go, and all that. I want to take a quick second to talk about Boban, because we've gotten a lot of questions about Boban. Why don't we play with Boban? Why don't, I think every game I get a tweet, why isn't Boban playing? Why not just throw Boban out there? One of the reasons why they're not playing Boban is because of the big change the Mavs made in this, just all over for their bigs, right? Their bigs now have to be switchable, and they have to be able to switch on to people. If you throw Boban in there, all of a sudden you cannot do your defense, right? Like the defense that has made your team one of the best in the NBA, right? Like second in the NBA over this last stretch. You cannot do that defense and many tenets of that defense if Boban is on the floor.
Right. I mean, we're and I don't want to say era. I feel like that's a dramatic way of putting it, but like a time where Dorian is spending a lot of time at the 5 in certain lineups, and Reggie Bullock is
closing games.
And Reggie's playing the 4. Like throwing Boban in, not obviously maybe not within that lineup, but like just within that philosophy, like you were saying, it throws off what they're trying to do in terms of being so versatile and I guess switchable. And so I think there are certain situations for Boban, but for the majority of situations that they find themselves in, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it doesn't. And that's the reason why he hasn't played. I think most fans at this point understand that and just hope to see him, because at almost every game, especially blowouts, people chant, "We want Boban," and I love it. It's one of my favorite things about this fan base. But coming up, let's get into a couple of the matchups. What's the best and worst matchup for the Mavs in the playoffs in the first round? And then, can Luka carry the Mavs to a title if he's the only all-star on a team? Maybe not just this team, but in the future. We'll talk about that and more coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about betonline.ag. BetOnline has everything for you. The latest odds, contests, player props. BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all your sports betting needs and info. Go check it out. all kinds of college basketball stuff. Just check out everything that they have available for you. I can't even keep up with all the college basketball. There's like tournaments right now, and then there's the actual tournament later. There's all kinds of things all the time. They have division futures for the NBA right now. The Mavs are an underdog to the Grizzlies for the Southwest Division. The Grizzlies are a minus 1,400 favorite. So if you put down, that's so wild. That is a crazy favorite. You'd have to put down $1,400 to win $100 on the Grizzlies right now. That's how wild that bet is. If you put down $100 on the Mavs to win the Southwest Division and the Mavs win it, then you could win $700. That is a wild bet right now. It doesn't look like the Mavs are going to win that division. But if you want to bet on that or any other kind of thing, go check out BetOnline. It's not just basketball. They're your source for sports wagering information needs, live betting, your favorite Vegas casino games, all that stuff. Head to the website. Use your mobile device to learn more about it. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen of the day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Lauren, let's get into some more of these questions. What playoff matchup is the best and worst for the Mavs this year? We've been going through this. I think we've been doing this all year, but it just keeps changing because of how these teams have been playing. Memphis, Golden State, Utah, Denver. There's really not another team the Mavs could play in the first round at this point, right? Minnesota's too far out of it. The Clippers, thank the Lord, are too far out of it, even though the Mavs will probably beat them this year. But of those four teams, what do you think is the best matchup for the Mavs?
Best matchup, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I think Utah. I just think personnel-wise, we match up, I think, pretty fairly against them. We have the best player in that series. Which I guess you can't, whatever. I'm not even going to go down that route. I think in a lot of series, we could potentially have the best player on the court.
Of these, I think Jokic in Denver is the only one where the Mavs wouldn't necessarily have the best player. He's better than Ja, and he's been better than Curry this year.
Yeah, I agree. So, but yeah, I think Utah's a good one. And I also think that Utah has got some underlying issues that in a playoff atmosphere could come out, and that could play into Dallas's favor. So for me, most favorable is Utah.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's tough.
It's a tough one. I would really want to see Draymond's supposed to come back in a couple days.
Yep.
And if Draymond comes back and he has a setback or he's not right for the playoffs, then that is a team that you'd want to play. If Draymond is back though, then that's a team that I'm not sure the Mavs.
Yeah.
They would be low on it. The other thing is this Denver team. Like, I know Jokic would be a bad matchup, but the rest of this Denver team is bad. And we are now into March. We're a month away from the playoffs starting, right? Like the end of the season is April 10th, and it's March 10th as we're recording this. So just Jamal Murray coming back. Like, we've not seen the Jamal Murray is playing 5-on-5. Jamal Murray is, playing contact. Like, we have not seen that stuff yet. So are we getting Jamal Murray just debuting for the playoffs, right? Is that the type of Jamal Murray we're getting? The Denver matchup is the least likely of these, but I kind of wonder if that's the team that the Mavs would want to face because they are the least talented of all these teams outside of Jokic.
Yeah, it's tough because Memphis, like I've also seen a couple of things about Michael Porter Jr. like nearing a comeback. Maybe, I don't know quite what to expect there. Timeline wise, I've just seen a couple of things. Like timeline, I don't know. In shape, I don't know. Like, what does he look like? So
he's had a back injury too. He's
that's no joke. And so Denver outside, like, I just have questions there. And it's kind of similar to Golden State. Like, how does Clay kind of continue to get more and more under him and build more consistency? I don't know. I just don't know what Golden State looks like come playoff time, especially if Draymond comes back. And even, I don't even know what's going on with James Wiseman. Is he coming back? Like, that seems all over the place with those reports. You know what I mean?
Even if he does.
Am I intimidated by James Wiseman? No. Is he 7'1", super athletic, and probably going to get like 12 rebounds a game? Yeah, that would be a problem for me.
Yeah,
but I guess you could make the same case about Rudy Gobert. But again, so many questions in terms of injury, coming back from injuries. What do they look like? But Denver and Utah, I guess I feel like those two, you do have an idea of what you're getting.
Golden State probably has if you just polled their fans and their media, probably the most confidence out of this whole group, as far as like, we're the best team out of this group for sure. But I kind of feel like all five of these teams are just like all on the same level right now. It could just go any way, right? There's no team that's stepping up really to match Phoenix. And all these, any of these teams could beat any of these teams at this point, right? I don't see a way where one team is dominant over another one. Do the Mavs need home court in the playoffs? I kind of think the only team they would need it against is Utah, because I just do not want to play. I don't think the Mavs would want to play potentially four playoff games in Utah. That's the only one that stands out to me.
Yeah, it's tough because like the last 2 years they haven't had that, and like they've gone out and I mean they've performed well on the road, but Memphis is a tough home crowd to play against. Like FedEx Forum goes crazy, so like I think that they need it. That's not something that I'm necessarily thinking about. It's really just how can you best prepare for the matchup, because it seems so up in the air right now. So home court advantage, for me personally, it's not super high priority.
Yeah, the only one I'm worried about is Utah. I think that's the only one that I'm even like making it a consideration.
Yeah,
because I can just imagine a scenario where the Mavs go in there and all of a sudden like Donovan Mitchell's taking 30 free throws. I'm like, oh my God, he is Dwayne Wade. Like,
I cannot even think about that scenario.
Exactly.
Oh, God.
All right, let's move on to a couple questions about Luka. Chris asked this question: could Luka ever take the Mavs to a championship and win it like Dirk while being the only All-Star on the team? We have not seen a lot of these teams. Obviously, Dirk is like the last one to win a title, being the only star. We saw Kawhi Leonard do it with, Tony Parker and Tim Duncan and those guys in the end of their career. But do you think in this NBA that Luka could be the only star and take the Mavs to a title?
It's difficult because part of me wants to be like, okay, well, what if you got a guy that's putting up all-star numbers but just didn't happen to make the team? And so like, you know what I mean? But it's difficult the way this league is. But I also am like, Luka's that good of a number one to where it's like maybe, but a lot of that also hinders on the rest of the league because there's such this point of emphasis of teaming up with other guys right now. So it's a really difficult question to answer, but I do have enough belief in Luka that he is so good, continuing to get better year after year. And if you never know what's going to happen if you get a favorable path, and injuries, like you just never know. So I don't want to say it's impossible, but you definitely got to have somebody that's putting up more than 15 points a game. You gotta have a number two, even if that number two isn't a Chris Middleton or a clear all-star.
The problem with a question like this is that, yes, it could happen. Of course, like everybody on the team could get hot, and then like the run they've just gone through, and then all of a sudden you breeze through a couple rounds because the team is shooting like 45% from three or something crazy like that, right? And if they hit open threes, this team is almost unbeatable, right? It's just they create so many open opportunities. Luka creates them. Jason Kidd's system has created so many open threes. And if they knock them down and then they can play good enough defense, they can beat anybody, even the Phoenix Suns, I believe. Like, I think they could beat them if they made enough threes. The problem is you don't always make enough threes, but you can get hot in the playoffs. It's almost like, a baseball team. If you can just get your bullpen to get hot enough throughout the playoffs, then all of a sudden they can just carry you. I think 3-point shooting could possibly carry you. But now the Mavs have this trio of Luka, Dinwiddie, and Brunson. And the last game against the Knicks sort of ruined this theory for me, but it's three guys that can get their shot that don't have to be three-pointers, right? That don't have to be these pull-up threes, that they can get into the lane, and Dinwiddie can get fouled, and Brunson can hit his little stuff in the lane, and Luka can get his shot against any single player in the league. And, they have those options. None of them worked in the game against the Knicks the other day, except for Luka, but they have those other options against some of these other guys. And so I think it's more likely now that they have a couple of those other guys added to this team. But man, it's hard to win a title, and it's hard to win a title when you have a margin of error that is so small because you don't have that other star on your team, right? Adding another star on your team makes the margin of error bigger, and you're able to get away with more and to miss threes more and, to do all that. The Marzi asked the question, is there a lot of similarities for Luka with Harden? And Harden, we saw him try to lead those Rockets teams to titles, and the thing that held Harden back was size. Luka has size on Harden that, and Harden was, a little better with the ball. Harden was better at his step back. Luka is getting to that point in his career, but Luka's size is a big difference in the playoffs because he can hit that mid-range stuff that Harden just never did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the mid-range part of it is huge. I also think that Luka, there's been more of an emphasis to play off ball a little bit, and it not just off ball, but like dribble handoffs, whereas with Harden, there was a lot of high pick and roll with Luka, again, very similar, but there are certain things that Luka does, I feel like, to incorporate others that's different than Harden. And Harden racked up a bunch of assists, very solid offensively. But I do think that if you watch their games closely, there are enough differences in how Luka incorporates just the overall flow of the offense and getting those open threes for other guys. I think it's a little bit different.
And Luka does things when he's not on the ball, right? Like Harden.
Yeah, you said it, not me, Nick.
And he did not do things when he's off the ball. All right, coming up, let's get into Jalen Brunson, Spencer Dinwiddie, because this is a big question for a lot of people. Should Spencer Dinwiddie be in the starting lineup? Is that a move the Mavs need to make? And should we be worried about Jalen Brunson and his play lately? We'll talk about that and more with Lauren coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about Built Bar. It's a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. They're absolutely delicious. And they're covered in 100% real chocolate, including the puffs, the ones with marshmallow in them. They're low calorie, high protein. They replace your candy bars. I'm telling you guys, these bars are so good that I would rather eat some of them than a candy bar. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. These are mostly 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar. That's where you're really getting it right there. 4 net carbs and 17 grams of protein. That's crazy. 17 grams of protein in essentially a candy bar. Check out all the different flavors. The coconut brownie chunk one is the best one. They have new flavors all the time. Right now, they have a German chocolate cake bar. They have a shamrock bar. They have the churro puff that I've bought multiple times. I love that bar. Double chocolate, cherry barcia, all kinds of different flavors. Go to built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order. Again, promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, Lauren, couple more questions here. We're getting into Spencer Dinwiddie and Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson took this leap this year, and for him, it was a little bit of a blessing and a curse, I think, because anytime a player like that takes a leap where they go from all right, he's a pretty good bench player, like spot starter every once in a while, to, oh, dang, this guy is a starter and has forced his way into the starting lineup because he's playing that well, then all of a sudden there's expectations on him. And we've seen Brunson in some of these games against, especially the Western Conference playoff teams or just playoff teams in general, not be able to play the same way he's been able to play against the Thunders of the world and the Magics of the world, the things like that. Bunch of people asked this question. Should we be worried about Jalen Brunson right now and Jalen Brunson's play against playoff teams?
Personally, I'm not worried about him. I definitely think that there are certain playoff teams that do a solid job of neutralizing him. I think Phoenix is one. I think the Clippers are one. But
you're not playing either of those teams in the first round.
Exactly. They're not playing either of those teams first round. And you have Spencer Dinwiddie, which I know is very much a part of this conversation, but he just, like, being able to rely on him allows Jalen Brunson to be even more of a catch and shoot 3 guy if he needs to be in a certain matchup, which he's proven he can be a solid player in that role this season. So personally, I'm not worried about Jalen Brunson. These last couple of games have definitely been tough, but when you insert a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie, obviously there are going to be some changes there and you're going to need to adjust to those changes. So personally, I'm not worried about Jalen Brunson. I'm more than happy with what he's done this season. And I've got a lot of faith in him.
Yeah, I'm worried. I'm worried that I've not seen his little, like, get in the lane and juke and pivot on one foot and turn around and hit a shot. We just have not seen that very often, and I'm curious why. I'm curious why we haven't seen him hit that as much. Is it just the way that teams are defending him? Is it the way now the Mavs are set up? Is it because adding Dinwiddie now takes away some of that space that that he used to have in the paint? We just haven't seen that part of his game very often. So I started to look at some of the numbers. For the season, Jalen Brunson is averaging 16 points, just over 5 assists. He's shooting 49% from the field, 37% from 3, 80% from the line. If you take him as just a starter, 46 games he's played as a starter this year, he's almost at 18 points a game. He's at almost 6 rebounds a game, 50, 40, and then 84 shooting splits, which is really good. Like that's the next level that he took as a player this year. Against playoff teams, the top 8 teams in both conferences, that's 35 games total, starts and not starts. 14 points a game, 5 assists, shooting 45, 32, and 77% from the line. Against just the West playoff teams, he's averaging 14 points, just over 5 assists, shooting 43, 30, and 76. Now, if you couldn't follow some of those numbers, it's what falls off for him against some of these teams is the 3-point shot. Mm-hmm. The 3-point shooting has really fallen off. As a starter this year, he's shooting 40% from 3. Against playoff teams this year, he's shooting 30% from three. That's been the big difference. So that doesn't even match my concern about him not being able to get his shot off in the lane. It's just he's not been hitting shots and 3-point shots against some of these West playoff teams. Now, does that mean that, you know, a lot of these teams will throw a wing on him and basically take him out of the game? You know, Memphis will throw, you know, like Kyle Anderson or somebody on him, or Golden State will throw like Otto Porter or Wiggins on him or something, and just like that kind of a guy, that big of a presence, takes him out of the game. But I started looking at those numbers. I'm like, those numbers kind of worry me. But the 3-point shooting is weird to me, that is the thing that's fallen off from him instead of, you know, the 2-point shooting or something else.
Yeah, it's tough because I'm sitting here looking at the team's numbers right now, and Spencer Dinwiddie is shooting. I don't even feel confident saying this. I'm looking at Basketball Reference, 45% on just under 5 threes a game. And so sometimes I wonder, like, with the looks that he's getting in terms of now the way this team is set up, if Luka's not getting a bucket and we need somebody to get a bucket, it's Dinwiddie. That's how it goes. And it's not just mid-range. It's not just at the rim. Like, this dude, we've seen him hit enough ISO threes, like off dribble moves. And so part of me wonders how that does affect Jalen Brunson, and how that does affect, I mean, those games against playoff teams, how many of them are recent games? And granted, we've only had Spencer Dinwiddie for like a month now, not even, but I do wonder if there's a little bit of a skew there. I don't know. But with Jalen, I do think that these playoffs are going to be big, because last year, I mean, we've gone up against the Clippers the last 2 years, and that's not a favorable matchup for him, but like, he hasn't performed too well. And so he's taken this step up. This is his opportunity to really like say, hey, I'm a starter on this team. He's earned that spot, but now you got to go put your money where your mouth is in the playoffs. And if he can't do that, especially like first 2 games, say he's not performing very well, I would not be surprised at all if you see a lineup switch, which might even, I don't know, that might sound crazy to some people in a playoff setting, but sometimes you got to make those changes.
A bunch of people asked this question too. A bunch of people asked the question. Oh, Mason and Joseph both asked the question. So Spencer Dinwiddie replace Brunson in the starting lineup right now. Is that something that the Mavs should do? And one of the things I think factors into this is Spencer Dinwiddie shooting 45% from three and hitting these catch and shoot threes. I think that'll come back down to earth a little bit. I don't think he's going to shoot. He's not been an elite shooter in his career. That's not something that's been his calling card. He has shot well at times in his career, but that's not something that I think can keep up. So that's something we're going to have to monitor. But I don't know, man.
Yeah.
It's having a lineup out there where Spencer Dinwiddie is the shortest guy and he's 6'6", that allows you to do so much on defense. And Brunson hasn't been bad on defense. There's not been many teams that have hunted Brunson consistently in a tight spot and have succeeded, and or even tried to do it. But yeah, having Spencer Dinwiddie, like, it's better in the closing lineups, I think. But the starting 5 probably doesn't mean anything. Luka's been killing it in starting 5s anyway, and so. That's where the Mavs really win. So I don't know about starting 5, but in closing 5s, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of seem like there are certain nights where he does get the nod over Jalen Brunson, and it just depends on who the matchup is and what's been going on that night. And so I think, yeah, like what you said, the closing lineup is definitely the most important. I hate to put it this way, but I also wonder how much impending free agency impacts Jalen has earned this spot. We want to keep him in a starting role. We don't want to give him, hey, you know.
Jason Kidd came out the other week and said, I'm here to like win basketball games and make these guys money, right? Isn't that something?
He did say that. He said that.
Did he come out and say that, right? Does that change? Do you think that changes anything that he does with Jalen Brunson knowing that fact?
Maybe. I think it has more to do with.
Did it change anything for Porzingis? Because I think it did.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I don't know. I do think the biggest thing is the fact that Jalen has taken the step up this year, and even like looking back on the nights when Luka was out and he had to step up, and he was stepping up and putting up numbers. And so I do think that he's earned it, and he's so beloved within this organization. He's earned the spot, and they're going to continue to give him the spot unless it becomes so obvious that they need to put Dinwiddie in that role, and there's no way around it. But what you said about having the shortest guy in your lineup being 6'6", like, whew, I love that. I just love that. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, I guess.
We will see what happens. By the way, over the last 10 games or so, Brunson is averaging 16 points a game, and he's shooting 48% from three. That's basically since Dinwiddie has been added. So his 3-point shooting has definitely gone up in the the time with Spencer Dinwiddie. Now that's even missing 5 threes against the Knicks the other night. What if I take that out? In 9 games, he's shooting 56% from 3. So with Spencer Dinwiddie and Luka, he's been shooting way better from 3. So that is a positive trend for sure, that all 3 of these guys, even Luka, is shooting better from 3 right now. Yep. That is a positive trend for all of them. So I think let's keep the lineups the way that they are right now. The 3-guard lineup has been a lot better than I expected it to be. Same. Dinwiddie's been a little bit better than I thought on defense. Brunson has been still holding his own. Those guys have been deferential enough and aggressive enough in their capacity, and Jason Kidd is somehow like marionette puppeting them all to where they're all playing along well. But that's the situation with Jalen Brunson, Spencer Dinwiddie. I think it just has to keep playing out the way that it is. And in come playoff time, we'll see what Jason Kidd decides, because I think there'll be like a nut up or shut up situation, right? Where he's like, all right, I'm going to put Dinwiddie out there, or I'm going to keep Brunson and Dinwiddie together. Last couple of questions. Let's run through some of these random ones. News with Booze asked, do the Mavs still have that leadership council? If so, who has been added? Jason Kidd commented about the leadership council a little while ago.
Yeah, I don't even know. I feel like he probably wants to try and keep it, but do I feel like it's what it was? I mean, obviously it's not what it was at the start of,
because KP's gone and Tim Hardaway's hurt.
Right, but like, have you replaced it and tried to keep the same like idea? I don't know. I my belief is that they're continuing to just try and emphasize like open communication and hearing everybody's input in terms of like the offense, like getting their looks, just input, get your input in and make everybody feel like heard and empowered within the offense, within the system, so everyone can play at their best. I don't know how I feel necessarily about the leadership council being this whole.
So I don't think the leadership council decided about anything like that. I think the leadership council, Jason Kidd was like, hey, I got this crazy idea. What if every single player in the lineup played opening night? And the leadership council was like, sure, that sounds good. And then they did it. That's basically
yeah. I don't know what to think.
Last question. This is from an account called Locked On Rangers that happens to be a podcast about a baseball team in the Metroplex in this area. Over under 4.5 Mavs who heard the news about baseball's lockout ending today.
Oh, I love this.
We see the Mavs talk all the time about, football and college basketball and obviously like, soccer. But I don't see them talking about baseball. The only baseball reference we ever see from the Mavs is Jason Kidd and that powder blue, like, Rangers fitted hat that he always wears.
Well, I'm trying to draw or like reach back and think, have I ever?
The problem is they're all gone. They're all living back home. Like besides like Dwight and them, I don't think anybody lives here over the off season.
Yeah, that's
to go to a baseball game is my point.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just am like, have I ever? I think the only time I've ever seen a Mavs player in a baseball jersey is at the Heroes game. Like I don't see them.
Dirk's charity.
See them at the
Dirk's charity baseball game where guys come out and actually play and wear a jersey. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, and so I don't know, but I hope that they're on board, especially with the free agency or pickups. Who knows.
I'm excited to go to some Rangers games. I've moved back recently and I have not gone to the stadium inside yet. So I'm excited to go to that. I'm excited to go to a baseball game. Actually, let's hear from Bryce. Bryce got all excited today. Bryce is Locked On Now from Locked On Rangers, daily podcast about the Texas Rangers. Let's hear what Bryce had to say.
Oh, welcome back, baseball. Welcome back. I've missed you. I've missed you so much. I promise I will never take you for granted again, even in the deep September games of a rebuild. I'm Bryce Patrick, host of the Locked On Texas Rangers podcast, with one thing you need to know about the hopeful April 7th actual opening day of the Major League Baseball season for your Texas Rangers. Up the middle infield, 2 of the biggest free agents in Texas Rangers franchise history in Marcus Semien at second base and Corey Seager at shortstop. Are they going to be worth the hype? Worth the $500 million combined that they're going to be making? They should be making a big splash. Rangers made a big splash in free agency. Hopefully that big splash translates on the field. I absolutely cannot wait to finally have some fun end of rebuild, now good baseball happening at the Rangers new stadium. All that and more coming up on the next episode of Locked On Rangers. So tune in and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, there you go. Lauren Gunn, go read her stuff on Mavs Moneyball. Go follow her on Twitter. You can see her Twitter handle in the description of this podcast. Great stuff all the time. And we'll see what happens with this Mavs team. It's what we're doing every single day. Thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen. We will be back tomorrow. Isaac has you covered with the Mavs versus Rockets post game. and you will be able to get that from him. Now, make your second listen Locked On NBA. I'm sure the boys are going to be talking about the Sixers and the Nets. That's probably, if that's not segment one, guys, tweet me and let me know, or else I'll come after them. Locked On experts covering the biggest stories around the NBA Monday through Friday in 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs. Peace out. Boom.